Hey everyone! I enjoyed making the chapter reaction/review a couple of weeks back so much, I thought I'd try and continue on making them. This is not a replacement for the next Point of East Blue video, which will be getting released in the next couple of days. Unlike last time, I'm recording the audio as I'm reading the chapter for the first time as well. With that out of the way, let's get into One Piece chapter 1115, Continental Fragments. We start off on the cover page. We see Yamato. She's getting a nice bento, getting made by Hiyori Ondotoko. I feel like this reminds me a little bit of Jinbei's cover story, just the pacing of it, where it started off like, yeah, okay, it's Jinbei, he's kind of doing stuff, it starts off slow, and then suddenly, oh, Poneglyph, oh, okay, this is suddenly escalated. I feel like that's the sort of vibe this cover story with Yamato is. It's giving me that sort of vibe. So I feel like it's going to be slow for another couple of chapters, and then suddenly there's going to be a massive reveal, and we're all going to be like, oh my goodness, this cover story is incredible. All right, next page. The flower capital, Wano. So we get the cover page, and then immediately we get to see... Sorry, my eyes went to the bottom of the page, and I saw some stuff. It's hard to believe this foreign transmission is reaching us, so they aren't completely cut off. They actually can get some broadcasts from the outside world. I guess because Kaido was there, it's not that surprising that there's some technology. He was communicating with the world government anyway, getting them weapons and stuff, so... Now you may be wondering how he became known as a pirate. We found the snail in the castle among Orochi's possessions. Yes, exactly. So you were a pirate, Joy Boy, just like Luffy. And Kinemon's like, oh, you know of Joy Boy, which makes sense because he was reading Odin's journal at the G4 naval base. Who cares? This is this the same guy we see at the G4 naval base? It looks like it's the same guys as I forgot their names, the ones that were impersonating Luffy. Damalo Black. They're guys that were impersonating Luffy and the crew at the start after the time skip, and they're now impersonating Kid and the crew. They're still keeping it up even though they're in jail, which is also funny. And of course he's making nonsense up a million times tougher than this Joy Toy. And we're back to the transmission. Marines reacting. We can see that Vegapunk, he says, I've only got a handful of poneglyphs, but their combined narrative clearly chronicles an unbelievable history about a great war in the distant past. Joy Boy faced an enemy organization now known as the World Government. The Marines are like, isn't that us? Well, he was a pirate. We see Top Man shouting Vegapunk while still chasing Luffy and Dorian Broggy. It's talking about how the World Government used to just be 20 separate kingdoms. We see, is this Mars? I'm not so good on the Celestial Dragons' names. Is Marcus Mars the one with the long beard, the Gandalf-looking one? Mars is... Oh, he's blasting out Conqueror's Haki. I think I need to zoom in a little. Get a larger version of the page. He's blasting out Conqueror's Haki. He's not killing the Denden Mushi, which is nice. Everyone thought he was going to just be like stomping and murdering all the Denden Mushi, but he's just knocking them out with Conqueror's Haki. It can be assumed that the alliance was only feasible way to oppose the formidable faction which Joy Boy belonged to, which Vegapunk continues. Afraid that the cause this conflict still eludes him, so we don't know the reason for this conflict. And so he's not judging the morality of the combatants, which is an interesting thing to say. This echoes what he was saying about Saturn a couple of chapters ago, where it's like, I'm not going to judge the morality because I don't understand why they're doing this. But yes, two opposing ideologies. And Joy Boy was born into a fantastical civilization. We're seeing Zunisha, or Zoe, with a ... thought bubble, so he's listening too, it seems. Everyone's listening to this, even giant elephants. One so advanced that it's hard to believe it existed 900 years ago. The weapons that existed during the century-long struggle are far beyond our modern science. Now we see Carrot and all the other mink tribe, the minks. We see the beast Katirs. We see Foxy on a tiny little ship, but he's still got his main trio. He's just making fun of it. He's rocking a mustache. I don't think I remember that from film Stampede. And therein lies the problem, says Vegapunk. We go cut back to the Labostratum. Stussy is getting called by Edison. Lower the barrier and hightail it out of here. and Edison is telling Stussy that there's no point in the barrier because the Gorosei, they can ignore it, and we also see Saturn knocking out more Dendenmushi. They're just slow walking, knocking out all the Dendenmushi with Conqueror's Haki. Edison, we've done all we can for them. They'll make it somehow. Jinbei is carrying Zoro. But yeah, we finally see Jinbei and Zoro. I think Sanji, or it sounds like Sanji, is asking Jinbei how much longer, and then he's yelling at Zoro. It's like, you're gonna get it later. Nami. Oh, maybe it was Nami. It was probably Nami communicating with it when we turned the page. They're moving their ships to blockade the northeast coast so they can see the cloud forming. And Nami's saying, if we get blasted out of the waters, she'll never forgive him. The Stella would never forgive Stussy if she let the Straw Hats get caught, and now Edison's telling Stussy to get out of there. But Stussy's like, I don't know what to do with myself. Stella's gone, what do? I haven't got a purpose. And we see Kaku, he looks kind of melancholy. I think he kind of gets that vibe. He's like, hey, it's for... He understands. He's like a member of CP0, the world government, and the Five Elders. They kind of just use him however they think. It's like, well, we lost our purpose a while ago when we got disowned. Sort of vibing. Now we cut to, I forgot the two giants that Usopp befriended on Enies Lobby, and we see Jewelry Bonnie and we see Sanji, and they're all fighting Horseman. John Horseman. I really should memorize the names of the Elder Stars. Yeah, they say, don't let him use his sword, he can cut anything. So, formidable swordsman. We see in a sort of speech bubble, it's a very spiky one. Sense the living voices. So I'm not sure if that's another elder communicating to him, or he's thinking this. But then he shouts Bonnie, and he goes for a big ol' slash, and Frankie kind of arm bars her out of the way. Oh, she's still in giant form. It was a bit hard to tell on the previous panel, but yeah, Frankie's just like choke slams her to get her to dodge. And he managed to cut off the head of the giant pirate ship. So that's actually quite the range. And I think that's Bonnie shrinking back down to regular size. And Bonnie confirms she can't maintain a distorted future for very long. The Void Century ended with Joy Boy's defeat, and we see a flash to the robot and to Zanisha as well. So whether the robot is hearing and reacting to this, but either Zanisha is probably remembering it as well. And we see Swords Boy, McHorse Boy, Old Man. Look, let me look up his name. Let's look up the Five Elders. Nasjuro. Saint Ethan. I'll just call him Saint Ethan. I did get Marcus Mars name correct. So Ethan. He's shouting, how much do you intend to say, Vegapunk? And then he kind of just bails from everyone else. And they're like, he's leaving. So they're like, yeah, this is... I clicked the next page, before I saw the next frame. Ethan, there are too many life forms here, but the aftermath had grander consequences. Ethan has, this is a very impressive panel, probably the best one of the chapter. I'll say what Vegapunk says first. The wake of the ancient conflict scarred the world, and those scars never healed. Ethan literally cuts the Labosphere in half. Like a clean cross section. And we could see the Sunny on the edge of the cloud. It's thankfully not getting cut, but damn, he's cut the entire thing. Like completely, like not like halfway through, like he hasn't chopped down the center vertically, but horizontally he's sliced it in twain. Oh, and his slice has opened up where all the CP agents were. And I think... Is it implied? No, it's not. We see all the Seraphim reacting as well. So it looks like the prisoners may have been on the upper side? Some on the upper side, some on the lower side, because you can see them falling down now that the thing's been cut in two. Though it does look like the Seraphim is still inside their bubbles. At least we see Hancock is, the Hancock Seraphim. We all know, next page, we all know travel between islands can be excruciatingly difficult. The seas one must traverse are vast and perilous. Most people are content to live and die at their place of birth, never experiencing any culture other than their own. Cut to, do I recognize this village? Not really. It looks vaguely European, but isn't that a bit obvious? It's like, yeah, everyone knows the seas are dangerous. That is common knowledge to us now, but it wasn't like that 1,000 years ago. A cataclysmic ecological disaster occurred during the Void Century. We're cutting now to the dojo where Zoro was raised, and we can see his teacher sort of looking in, like, not pensive, but he's like, this is interesting. But I find it interesting because the Void Century is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was 900 to 800 years ago. But he's saying it wasn't like that 1,000 years ago, so was there something... Or if it's the cataclysmic ecological disaster occurred during the Void Century, so maybe it was fine 1,000 years ago, and then 1,000 to 900 years ago, it was fine, and then between the 900 and 800 years ago, probably at the beginning, that's when the ecological disaster happened. And the ancient world was swallowed by the ocean. We are now living atop the remnants, continental fragments of land masses that once were. And we cut to an underwater city. Can't really tell how advanced that ancient city looks, but it is definitely a full-on ruins underwater. And this is interesting. So I said in my last one, my theories were that the water level rising isn't purely due to the actions of Imu and the Mother Flame powered weapon. I speculated that there was probably something else that occurred that was causing the water levels to rise, and that the ideological clash is between Joy Boy and the, let's just say the world government or Imu or whoever, and that was what they were disagreeing on. That's why the war occurred, and that Joy Boy may have actually been fine with the water level rising, which is why he took to the sea, while the world government was trying to stop it and maybe had to do something drastic to stop or slow it down. Because, not to recap too much, you should watch my last chapter review where I go through this at the start of the video. But it seems odd to me that the world government wanted the sea levels to rise and Joy Boy was preparing for the loss. And so it's like, oh yeah, the world government's going to win, so I'm going to prepare everyone to be living on the sea. Rather, I thought of it the other way of the world government actually didn't want the sea waters to rise, but they couldn't stop it. But Joy Boy was like, well, it's going to happen anyway, so I'm going to prepare for victory where we live on the ocean. But that's that theory. The bottom of the panel, we see the Revolutionary Army, and they're all freaking out, saying, "Say what?" Sabo looking very pensive, wide-eyed, angry even. The world of a millennia ago sleeps unseen at the bottom of the ocean. Next page. Oh, we cut to Nami's village. I know it's hard to believe on my word alone, but there really was multiple vast continents back then. And they're all saying, "This is insane! Hey Nojiko, where do you think you're going? The whole world is at stake." And Nojiko's kind of unbothered. She's like, "Oh, I gotta go check on the tangerine orchard." She's not bothered at all. This change in the world helps explain how a century of history could be censored. A feat that seems nigh impossible, but it makes sense when you consider the undeniable conclusion all the data points to. Within a mere century, the average sea level rose by a staggering 200 meters. And they're saying, what, 200 meters? This is the Marines again. And that makes sense. That there would... it's interesting that it happened during the Void Century. So this wasn't... Unless... Could the... This is before I turn the page. Should I finish the chapter? I feel like I'm near the end of the chapter anyway, but my initial thought, 200 meters, if it happened during the Void Century, could it be that they did get their hands on certain weapons and they were all used to... Like the equivalent of, you know how people say, if we had a nuclear war, nukes would go off anywhere and most of the world would become uninhabitable. Maybe the Flood is sort of simple for that, where a worldwide war happened and nukes were everywhere, or in this case, water, sea level rising weapons were used, and it was all taken out. Maybe. Because if enough of them, what was it? It rises 5 meters? What was I think it was 5 meters. So that would be, let's do the maths, 40 times being used. A warship's only 60 meters tall. The Marines are saying, no wonder the old world disappeared. They're saying, stop listening to this crap, we have work to do. The Seraphim and all those imprisoned, they're falling out of the lab building. Oh, it looks like the bottom half of the lab has actually fallen down onto the island. And the Marines want to rescue them. Mock Town, once again, they're like, his tails keep getting taller. There's someone that looks... He looks like Hawkins, but I think it was Bellamy's long-haired associate. The old fart's lost his marbles, what a joke. Sakura Kingdom, which is Chopper's hometown. Dalton, is that really possible? And we see Kureha still kicking. And even now, the world still finds a way to keep things interesting. She looks downright excited. The mountain is around 200 meters. We see... it's one of the... part of... I've forgotten what they're... Baroque works. It's the one that's an artist, and I think we see the mole lady from behind, but I can't remember the names off the top of my head. And they're like, that mountain is around 200 meters. You're saying that something that tall would be submerged. That's awful. How many people died? That begs the question, how and why did such a flood occur? Naturally, your first inclination might be to assume it was some kind of natural disaster. Okay, so it wasn't a natural disaster. It was a man-made calamity. We see Morgans, big news Morgans, that you can't be serious. If this catastrophe was brought about by natural means, there would be records denoting early warning signs several centuries earlier. It was a severe world-altering event after all, but in all my research into meteorology, geology, ecology, and atmospheric science confirmed that there was no such natural build-up. It is impossible for such a drastic change to spontaneously happen within the span of a mere 100 years, meaning the cause lies elsewhere. My suspicions were confirmed a few days ago when I analysed the world's current sea levels. So this does seem to be heavily implying that probably more towards the nuclear war scenario I said a couple of seconds ago. This will be hard to accept, but that disaster 800 years ago. So it keeps... I think we need a stronger timeline here, Vegapunk. You're saying 1,000 years ago, and then during the Void Century, and then 800 years ago. It was caused by ancient weapons technology capable of sinking the whole world. And that very same firepower evidently still exists, just waiting to be used again. In other words, that great war which ravaged the world during the Void Century is still ongoing, and we see a close-up of Emu. And when I say a close-up of Emu, I just mean Black Blob, the scary eyes. Okay, that's a lot to take in. It's good to know, to get final confirmation that it isn't a completely natural disaster. I'm just scrolling back to what he was saying. There's a lot to take in. There's several things to talk about this chapter. It's interesting that I do like seeing Damalo Black now pretending to be Captain Kidd, which is hilarious. But it's kind of funny that they only briefly touched on Joy Boy as an opposing faction to the 20 Kings. Though we do see an outline of a silhouette of Joy Boy, and yes, he looks pretty much identical to Gear 5 Luffy. So that's good to see. Thing about Stussy, maybe Stussy will join the crew. She's like, I don't know what I'm going to live for, because she seemed maybe very indebted to the Stella or to Vegapunk. She's kind of like, oh, well, he's dead, so now what? And I want to see what Kaku's going to do, because that expression, it's a very interesting one. I'll put it up on screen, but it's a very interesting expression he's got there. It's very soft. But yeah, seeing Ethan absolutely showing off those sword skills, that's pretty crazy. That he cut the entire lab. I guess it's like mostly cloud, but there's still like the metal container in the center. Like that's I'm trying to think. Does Zoro have an equivalent feat? It's reminiscent of when Mihawk like shredded the icebergs during the war. Except I don't know, this seems larger. And it looks like the Seraphim can potentially be released soon. So they might be getting put back in play. But yeah, sorry, here's the panel I was looking for. It wasn't like that 1,000 years ago. A cataclysmic ecological disaster occurred during the Void Century. So it goes 1,000 years ago, large continents, giant cities, technological advancement. Void Century starts. I guess maybe the Void Century is the entire war, but it's... I just really want to know. I really want to know what is happening during the Void Century. Then yes, the man-made... He does imply that it's the Mother Flame-fueled weapon that caused the sea level rise. But if it was 5 meters per island destruction, and it had to have been fired 40 times. Which, that's a question. So, Could the answer to that question be there are potentially more of this weapon? Is Pluton potentially a mass-produced weapon back in the day, and what we now know as Pluton is the last one that survives? Sorry, not Pluton. We think it's Uranus, don't we? Pluton is the one that's under Wano. Uranus is the one potentially that is in the hands of Meri-Jua and the Gorosei and Imu and all that. So if Uranus, assuming that's what it is capable of rising it by 5 meters each time, could there have been more than one? And this Uranus is just the last one that remains. Or maybe it's all equivalent, that Uranus and Pluton both, like, we see what I assume is Uranus destroying an island, and Pluton is known as the island-destroying weapon. Could those have been the main two factions? And then where does Shirahoshi as Poseidon come into all of this? Because, yes, controlling all the Sea Kings and all that, it's very impressive, but compared to absolutely blasting an island and leaving a hole in the water, it's pretty... It's not the same level. I do like Vivi just shutting Morgan's. I was like, stop talking! I'm trying to hear this. But yes, he's confirmed. I think my theory is probably mostly dead about the seawater levels rising naturally. If, not naturally, but there being some sort of thing happening that caused the sea levels to rise, and the world government and Joy Boy disagreed on how to address that issue, and then there was a war as a result. If Vegapunk is saying here that that change happened over the course of 100 years, then there is probably... What I guess the big question is, what did the war start over? Because my theory was the war started over... the water levels were rising. 20 kings didn't want the sea waters to rise because they would lose their kingdoms, because if there's no landmass, there's no kingdoms. And Joy Boy, on the other hand, was like, no, but we can all live together as one nation on the water. It could still potentially be that. But from a different perspective, not the sea levels are rising, we're going to lose our kingdoms, so we're going to oppose Joy Boy. But probably Joy Boy doing some sort of massive revolution that tried to join all the world's people into one nation. And then the 20 kingdoms were like, no, we like our 20 kingdoms. We like ruling over things. So I guess those are the big questions. I'm curious to see how much longer, because we're seeing Den Mushi getting absolutely, not destroyed actually, but dominated and knocked out by Saturn and Mars, just walking around shooting out Conqueror's Haki. So I guess we'll find out next week. There is no break next week, so yeah, that's the chapter. I was going to try and put this within hours of the initial release, but it released at around 1 a.m. while I was asleep. Either way, I'll see you in a couple of days for The Point of East Blue, The Tale of Two Liars. And remember, it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day.